What's good? It's Woog. I just read some news and I wanted to react to it immediately. I just read that Brian McIntyre, BoMac, Terrence Crawford's trainer, confirmed, or at least said that Terrence Crawford had texted him yesterday saying that Errol Spence Jr. has decided to activate that rematch clause. So it sounds like they're going to run it back, and they don't have a date. They don't have a division, whether it's 147, 154. As far as I know, I would imagine it's 154 because Spence made it clear he has no plans on fighting at 147 and, reiterated how difficult it had been for him to make that weight. But damn, it sounds like Crawford versus Spence 2 is going to happen. And I mean, as much as the boxing world wanted and had been dying to see Spence versus Crawford 1, given what we saw in that first fight, I feel like most of us are kind of like, not that we don't want to see, well, yeah, I guess we don't really want to see it. Not because it's not a competitive fight, even though the first fight wasn't a very competitive fight, but as much as the competitive nature is what will turn us off to Crawford versus Spence 2, our concern for Errol Spence's health, in my view, is as much, if not more, of a concern, just because of the beating that he took against Crawford and what that might mean in a rematch, especially if Spence doesn't take adequate time off. Now, BoMac had said hopefully they could get it done before the end of this year, which, I mean, really is a head scratcher if that's the case. I'm thinking at the very least, you would want, if you're Errol Spence, to have at least 9 to 11 months off and not doing much of anything, and then trying to get back into the mix at 154 and try to get in where you fit in. Like, I was thinking that if Spence was going to continue a boxing career, and I know that narratives shift overnight. Yes, they do shift when you get a performance like Spence versus Crawford 1. That does shift the paradigm. But given what we got, I was hoping that if Spence was to resume a career at 154, that he would fight like a mid-tier, like outside of the top 5, top 8 at 154. Like, you're not going to go into a fight with Sebastian Fundora or Brian Mendoza or Tim Tszyu, but just a kind of get your beak wet or get your feet wet in the division type of fight just to get a win. And I think it was Boxing Wave who suggested Terrell Goucher. I'm actually down for a pick like that. I think that it's a winnable fight for Spence, and he just needs to get some rounds back under his belt and get some confidence going again, so then you could maybe pursue 1 or 2 more big fights before you call it a career. But going right back into this rematch against, oh my gosh, against Terrence Crawford after that happened in the first fight, look, maybe we get a better performance from Errol Spence in this rematch. Like, I'm obviously going to do further analysis. And if this fight is in fact made official, given a date, a venue, and everything like that, a division, then yes, I'm going to do some videos and I'm going to do a full preview on the fight. But my gut instinct says, I know a lot of people think that this is going to go even worse for Errol Spence. I don't think it can't go much worse. I mean, it could go worse, but just moment by moment, minute by minute, in terms of Spence's non-effectiveness, I don't think it gets much worse. Like, yeah, it could get worse in the sense that he could get cleaned up and actually put on his back instead of on his butt and go out, something like that. But I'm just saying, in terms of the non-competitiveness, minute over minute, round over round, that couldn't have got much worse for Errol Spence. Terrence Crawford pitched a near shutout. You maybe could have given Errol Spence round 1, but that's really about it. But I do tend to think that at 154, he would feel a little bit better physically going into the fight. The question is, how much of these past things really did catch up with him? Like, I was always of the belief, and I caught a lot of flack from some hardcore Spence supporters saying, why do you keep on bringing up the accident? This is before Spence versus Crawford 1, but I was talking about it going into the Danny Garcia fight, going into the Yordenis Ugas fight. I'm just saying, look, I've got all the respect in the world for Errol Spence, and yes, the decision to fight Crawford again in a rematch, yes, the guy is unbelievably courageous, but I was just suggesting, the guy's not Superman. I don't think you could get launched from your drop top at a high speed and come out of that truly unscathed. Like, a lot of people really just bought into the fact that it was nothing but superficial wounds and, maybe losing some teeth, but no structural damage, no tissue damage, no bone damage. Like, a lot of people were just actually believing that Spence emerged from that accident unscathed and that this would not impact any performances going forward. I'm just saying, even if he performed the way that he did against Danny Garcia, which I thought was great. Yeah, I thought he performed great against Yordenis Ugas. Yes, there were a couple questionable or scary moments, but I thought it was more or less business as usual for Errol Spence Jr. I mean, nobody has stopped Danny Garcia. I'm not even sure Terence Crawford could stop Danny Garcia. I don't know this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Garcia could go the 12-round distance with Terence Crawford. But even given those performances for Errol Spence, I'm just saying, who's to say that just because all of that wear and tear, from the accident to the retina tear to the second car accident to all of the fights that Errol Spence has had in the past, who's to say that these don't eventually slowly creep in and catch up to you over time? You couple that with this last fight against Terence Crawford, I don't know what we have in Errol Spence going forward. And so, yeah, I've got a problem with him activating this rematch clause against Terence Crawford. I don't think it's going to bode well, but I do think that there's a chance that we can get a better performance from Errol Spence. I think that this is one of those scenarios where he can fight a 12-round decision loss or something like that, and it be a somewhat competitive fight, and it ends up being a bit of a moral victory. Like I was likening a fight that I was, recently previewing. It was Chris Eubank Jr., or should I say Liam Smith versus Eubank Jr. 2. I was saying, okay, maybe Eubank Jr. fights a fight that goes the distance, doesn't get knocked out like he did in the first fight, but loses a competitive decision, and therefore call it a moral victory in the way that Roy Jones Jr., after getting knocked out by Antonio Tarver in their rematch, Jones fought him a third time and it went the 12-round distance. Tarver won the fight. Jones didn't look good at all. Jones got wobbled a few times in that fight, but he made it the 12-round distance. And even though he lost a pretty wide decision, it was almost like, okay, you could at least hang your hat on the fact that you went the distance. Now you could call it a career. And I thought that Roy was going to call it a career then. He ended up fighting way too many fights after that. But the point remains, if Errol Spence Jr. goes the 12-round distance against Terence Crawford, you could kind of call it a moral victory of sorts. I know that that sounds crazy given how 50-50 of a fight this was going into that first fight. But again, perceptions change, expectations change, and it could happen overnight within a blink of an eye. In the blink of one fight, your idea of a fighter can totally change. And I'd imagine the vast majority of the boxing community have a totally different impression of what Errol Spence can do going forward, given what we just saw in his first fight with Terence Crawford. Like, I'm not liking this and what it might mean for Errol Spence's short-term and long-term health, but I wouldn't be surprised if he fights a more competitive fight in this rematch. And look, I'm assuming that Terence Crawford is as motivated and will be as motivated going into this rematch as he was going into the first fight. But there's maybe he is as motivated. I'm just saying that it would be hard to top how motivated he was for that first fight, given the long road that he had to finally securing the fight with Errol Spence. All the games that the PBC, as well as Terence Crawford's own promoter, Top Rank, had been kind of playing with his career. Anything from calling him non-marketable to having difficulties in securing big fights against the opponents that matter. And then he finally gets that fight against Errol Spence, and he knows or doesn't know how diminished Errol Spence might be coming into this first fight against him. Terence Crawford had to have been immensely motivated in that first fight. I could only assume that he's as motivated or nearly as motivated going into the rematch. I'm assuming that he's not going to come into this rematch thinking, oh, I've got this one in the bag. Look at what I did to him in the first fight. And then undertrain. I just don't see that as being Terence Crawford's MO. But let's just say that he's in a way different spot career-wise and career accomplishments-wise than he was before that showdown against Errol Spence. But yeah, I wasn't surprised, unfortunately, when I read that Errol Spence decided to activate the clause. I would expect nothing less from an extremely prideful and accomplished champion warrior as Errol Spence Jr. I'm just saying, man, proceed with caution, dude. I know it's the hurt business, but we just saw a lot of hurt in that first Spence versus Crawford fight. And I don't know what it means for this rematch, but tactically, strategically, how much are you going to change your approach if you're Errol Spence? And even if you strategically alter things, Are you able to carry those things out physically? What are your quick twitch reflexes looking like? Again, especially after this first beatdown at the hands of Terrence Crawford. I just don't know what version of Errol Spence we can expect going forward. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the news of Errol Spence activating this rematch clause against Terrence Crawford. Again, I'm not surprised, but it's still pretty unfortunate in my view. But I mean, what could I say to somebody with the pedigree and the history, the track record of Errol Spence Jr.? I mean, I get it. Even if I don't get it, I get it. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. And by the way, what this means in terms of Errol Spence, you know, he wasn't going to fight Canelo anytime soon. We've got to see Canelo versus Jermell Charlo, see how all that plays out. And then Tim Tszyu at 154 is about to fight Brian Mendoza. Man, what a schedule for 2023 for Tim Tszyu, right? But yeah, this shouldn't disrupt any other plans. I mean, I'm sure Terrence Crawford is still going to want the winner of Canelo versus Jermell Charlo, assuming Terrence Crawford is able to handle business against Errol Spence in this rematch. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.